One of the things, of course, on Easter that is emphasized is after Christ left his body, after a lot of torture and things like that, 2 days later, 3 days later, on the third day he rose again, they say. So 3 days later he came out of his tomb, appeared to his disciples, and basically wanted to tell people, look, we're not our bodies. We are souls in our bodies, and there is life. That life doesn't end just because we've left the planet. And it was Kali Yuga, and people were very used to just the material plane, things being very material oriented. The only reality is the body and what happens to it. Who talks about energy? No one talks about energy, and so that's the reality. And oh my God, his body was tortured, and therefore, what a horrible event. But what Christ showed is he transcended. First of all, he was an avatar like the rest of our gurus. And so he wasn't ever suffering during any of that. But, of course, those who witnessed the whole ordeal of him being tortured and then dying and would have felt inner torture themselves watching all of that happen. And yet, his message is, look, whatever happens to the body, okay, but my soul, who I am, as a soul has not even been affected at all. And look, I've come again to show you that even though I left my body, here I am. And so think of yourselves in this way as well. And think of that test that I just went through, that you all witnessed. And look, everything's okay. I'm in God now, and you will be also in God. This is the promise. You too will be in God. And so I wanted to back up just a little bit. Last week we had what is called Palm Sunday, and that's the time when Christ entered into Jerusalem, and many, many followers were very, very enthusiastic, including, of course, his disciples. The 12 are emphasized. Of course, he had many, many more. But the 12 closest disciples were always with him, traveling with him. And each of them, though, of course, had their own personality, their own expectations, their own egos. I don't think it's probably true that they each became free in that lifetime. Master didn't mention that they all got free, so we don't know. But so in a way, they're like all of us who are followers as well of our guru. And if we saw our guru go through what happened a week later, we'd be horrified and would think, why did this have to happen? And have a great test in God, a great test in our faith in God. Because when Christ entered Jerusalem the week earlier, hopes were so high. He had such a huge popularity. And of course, the disciples must have been thinking, wonderful, we've seen him do miracles. We've seen him talk about a revolutionary Dwapara Yuga, though they wouldn't have said it back then, a revolutionary Dwapara Yuga way of looking at life. Something much more than just ritual that's done day in, day out with no real meaning, or that has lost meaning. There was a need for a new way of doing things, a need for feeling that God's love is primary over God's law. And so there were many new meanings that were happening historically at that time that were so powerful. Here they are, a couple thousand years later, still a powerful message. Just as 5,000 years ago, we had Krishna, Arjuna, and everybody doing the Bhagavad Gita, Leela. And here it is, incredibly strong, 5,000 years later. That's a true, powerful message from the divine through avatars that happens. And it represents why and how God loves us so much. Imagine people suffering day in, day out with no hope. And yet, periodically, an avatar is sent to bring a deep message and to show us that our suffering is something we can get through. And if we cling to God, as the reading was saying, then we are rewarded in a deeper connection to the divine. When we turn our backs on God after we've gone through a big giant struggle, our faith can be really tested. You know, you can think, why did that have to happen to me? Why is there still so much suffering inside of me about that issue that happened to me? Why can't I just shake this off? Why can't I just let it go? And so it causes suffering in us, and it causes reactions, often subconscious reactions to other things that remind us of that. It's very difficult to get rid of past hurts. And yet, if we can pursue the spiritual path with a lot of willpower and a lot of strength, and turn to the divine whenever we do have our buttons pushed, whenever we are going through incredibly difficult times, then we train ourselves to turn to God every time we are suffering. We train ourselves by doing just that, turning to God rather than turning away and putting a distance between ourselves with God, as though God were a parent who had punished us, or God was not fair, or, does God even care? And all those attitudes, you can't say, oh, it's wrong, don't think that, or feel that. But those are the attitudes and the feelings that make us turn away from God, that make us just kind of not quite want to open our hearts and say why. We may instead close our hearts and say it shouldn't have. And that's a whole difference between the open attitude and the closed attitude. The closed attitude, you'll always know you're in a closed attitude when you feel contracted, when you feel kind of imploded in yourself, when you can't look up and look into the light, when you're in such a cranky mood that you can't even laugh or come out of yourself. That's contracted. And we should, rather than say, I shouldn't be this way, we should say, okay, that is a sign that something's going wrong, and what can I do about this? And what we can do about this is meditate, open our hearts, talk to the divine, talk to our guru. He's right here with us every step of the way. And he wants us to pour our hearts out to him. And things do get explained over time. When something horrible happens, like the reading was saying, God is always trying to instruct us, trying to give us lessons. And so we can ask, what is this lesson? That's the first step towards opening up after the contractive feeling. What is the lesson, Master? Tell me what I was supposed to learn from this very, very difficult thing. It seems impossible that anything of worth has come out of this tragedy, but tell me what the lesson is, and I want to learn. And just the desire to want to learn is another step to take. I want to learn. And if you don't want to learn, then want to learn. I want to learn. And that also is opening up and turning towards the light. I want to know. I want to know what that lesson could be, even though another part of us is saying, I don't want to know. But allow that to be, and then we can move through it. And don't get caught up in, a spiritual person never has these kinds of negative feelings, or if I were more spiritual, I would forgive immediately, or if I were more spiritual, fill in the blank. The feelings we have are the feelings we have, and we can work with Master and the Divine to transmute those feelings, to transform those feelings. And so try from now on, during this time of Easter, there's always a special energy that comes with these kinds of holidays and celebrations. Just as in Deepavali, much more light can come into the world. During Christmas, the same thing. Same with Easter. So many other holidays that are here in India as well. It's always about bringing in more light. So this also is a time where the light of God can shine on us and help reveal some of the darknesses that need to be healed, and help us let go and open our hearts and give it over to Master, give it over to the Divine. It's not easy to do. You can say, I've surrendered it to God. But it's an act of will to surrender. It's not a passive action. It's an action through choice that we decide to do, and of course we're just not the ones in control. When bad karma comes, it goes against our desire for control over our lives. And the reason we want control is because the last time bad karma came, we really didn't like it. And so now if I could just have more control, I could prevent anything bad from happening again. Well, and then something bad happens, and we not only don't want it to happen, but it reminds us of how the last time it happened, it was so horrible, and then we tense up even more. And if instead we could just say, what is trying to happen here? What is trying to happen? That's a great line. That's a great thing that Swami Kriyananda gave us all. He gave so many instructions on how to face tests, but one very important one is the attitude of what is trying to happen here. And, in a way, Christ was showing that to all of his followers as well, because, Christ came to them 3 days later. He was in the flesh when he came. He wasn't just, an outline of a soul. He came in the flesh. And so a good devotee at that point is going to say, what's trying to happen here? And so really, what is trying to happen here? What's trying to be shown here? And then many of them that got it started talking about it with others, and the word passed around, and then this whole big other religion was created. Of course, it's changed over the years, but there's still a main message, and that was one of the reasons why Yoganandaji would emphasize both the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, because the Bible is a great scripture as well. And what's wonderful is in Autobiography of a Yogi, we have the example, the chapter called Sri Yukteswar's Resurrection. And so he also appeared in his flesh. This is not a huge miracle, perhaps, for an avatar who can do anything. And, sometimes in religion, Christ appearing in this way is seen as a one and only event. And by having it also an autobiography of a yogi, it reminds us this is something any yogi who's an avatar especially, or perhaps who has siddhis, but can do these things. And every time it is done, it's saying, look, I'm not the flesh. I'm so much more than that. I'm a child of God. I'm a part of the divine. That is who I am. Coming here to earth is really just about working through my lessons, working through my karma, reconnecting with friends, hopefully, reconnecting with enemies. And Master said, crowds of souls try to come to the earth to work through their karma, because earth is a good place to get some karma worked out. The concept of karma, reincarnation, it's universal among the universe. And so Master said there were other planets where other souls go to work out other kinds of karma. And so at Earth, we should think, I'm lucky to be here where I can suffer and work through my very incredibly difficult karma. And so, we knew what we were getting into before we came here. We had desires that popped up while we were in the astral world, as Master tells us, that made us race to get into our mothers on the earth plane. And sometimes there's elbows as to who can have the immediate parent that's available that matches our light. And so we zoomed in and we got it. We are here. And sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not so great. But let's try from now on to say what is trying to happen when difficulties come up. What is trying to happen? What is the lesson here? What am I supposed to be learning? And try to have that faith where we are turning towards God during the most difficult times rather than away. It's just a simple matter of, rather than burying the head, to look up into the light. God bless you all and happy Easter.